Asian equities tank as US President Donald Trump implements tariffs on its biggest trading partners. Hundreds gather at Africa's top mining conference to tackle illegal mining. And a supermarket boycott shakes the Balkans as shoppers protest soaring prices. Hello, I'm Taiba Aydin with the latest business and finance news here on TRT World. Asian stocks tanked on Monday after US President Donald Trump signed off hefty tariffs on China, Canada and Mexico and warned the European Union would be hit soon. Japan's Nikkei 225 fell more than 2.8%, while the Topix lost around 2.5%. South Korea's Kospi dropped 2.5%, while the small-cap Kosdaq traded 2.79% lower, and Hong Kong's Seng dropped 1.23% at the open. Chinese markets remain closed for the Lunar New Year holiday. On Saturday, Trump signed an order implementing a 25% tariff on imports from Mexico and Canada and a 10% tariff on goods from China. Its annual trade with the three countries combined is around $1.6 trillion. For more on this, we're joined by Jamil Ahmed, Chief Analyst at the online trading platform GTC. Now, Jamil, just 2 weeks into his second term, Donald Trump has hit the US's biggest trading partners with some hefty tariffs, and we're already seeing the immediate effect on Asian markets, but how will this impact the global economy?
Well, global trade accounts for somewhere near 60% of world GDP, which is why we're seeing so many negative headlines creep through on what the reality will be on the ground should this be implemented, and then the test of time being how long these tariffs are implemented for. We do have to remember a few different things, though, on a positive light, is that the former US president, who's now returned to the White House, is a deal maker. This is likely a negotiating tactic, which we've seen before. But he did also say that tariffs would be the favorite word in the dictionary, and we're seeing this come to light. Now, when it comes to more statistic towards what impact this could have on the world economy, we do have the previous presidency between 2016 and 2020, where we had that prolonged episode of tit-for-tat tariffs and the breakdown of bilateral relations with China. At that point, it led to the weakest year of global GDP growth since the beginning of that decade, which was the start of the sovereign debt crisis.
Right, we seem to have lost Jamil Ahmed, Chief Analyst at GTC. Let's take a look at some of the other top business stories from around the world. Southeast Asia's manufacturing PMI dropped in January as weak demand from China and President Trump's tariff threats dampened business confidence. Factory activity in the region fell to an 11-month low of 50.4, with China hitting a multi-month low of 50.1. Japan saw its sharpest decline in nearly a year, while other nations like Taiwan and the Philippines faced slower production. South Korea recorded slight growth at 50.3. Australia's retail sales took a dip in December as shoppers reined in on spending after Black Friday, falling 0.1% from November. Despite the drop, discounting and Cyber Monday promotions helped boost fourth quarter economic growth to 1%, surpassing the expected 0.8%. OpenAI has unveiled a new tool, Deep Research, designed to handle time-consuming online research tasks. This marks the second AI agent released by OpenAI this year. Available to paying customers through the ChatGPT chatbot, the tool can analyze text, images, PDFs, and uploaded files to generate detailed research reports in minutes. And Taiwan has banned government agencies from using DeepSeek over security concerns. The Ministry of Digital Affairs warned all agencies and critical infrastructure to avoid the tool. The island, already on high alert for cyber attacks, has long accused China of using grey zone tactics to exert pressure over its sovereignty claims. Croatian consumers are so upset at rising prices, they've begun a week-long boycott of major retailers. It follows the success of a one-day protest last week and has inspired similar movements in other Balkan nations. Christina Ramic has the story.
This was Croatia's shops, malls and petrol stations last Friday. Shelves stocked, but very few shoppers.
It's time, and it should be done that way. People who live on a small pension need to survive.
What began as a simple call-out on social media by the consumer advocate Hello Spektor for fed-up Croatians to snub stores for a day turned into a successful campaign. According to recent data, sales plummeted in the retail sector on the Friday boycott by more than 50%.
We are from Germany and we always thought that the money difference was big. A lot to spend here, a lot. It is even more expensive than in Germany.
The fury over prices in Croatia began to rise when the local currency, the kuna, was replaced by the euro after it joined the European Union in 2013. According to recent figures, food prices have soared by more than 30% over the past 3 years.
When the euro came, they did not just raise prices tenfold. They were talking 10, 20%, but over 100%.
From Friday the 31st, Croatians will be joined by Slovenians, Kosovars and North Macedonian customers. They'll be boycotting for 1 week.
I understand such activity of citizens. There should be no dilemma, since from the beginning I wanted to stress about the behavior of some individuals within this business.
We support companies doing well, making a profit, but all of this must be within realistic limits. It cannot be at the expense of the little man.
The campaign encourages people to avoid 3 major international chains: Lidl, Eurospin and DM, plus 3 overpriced products in the region: carbonated drinks, bottled water and detergent in all stores. Consumers are also encouraged to just stay home and boycott catering outlets, accommodation, transport and delivery services.
We want to send an even stronger message to all those who generated this impossible situation, this natural disaster that affected Croatian consumers, that we have had enough.
The Croatian government is considering a list of products or processes that better identifies shelf prices and further protects consumers.
In stores with larger square footage, it will be mandatory to highlight these products.
But for now, the focus will be on the buyer boycotts across the Balkans and whether they will achieve the desired results. Christina Šimić, TRT World.
And for more on this, we're joined by Nevenka Tromp-Vrkic, live from The Hague in the Netherlands. She's a lecturer at the University of Amsterdam. Good to have you on the programme with us, Nevenka. Now, how has social media amplified consumer resistance to inflation in the Balkans, and has it been effective so far?
Without social media, the boycott would absolutely not be so widespread and eventually successful. It all started with a Facebook group called Hello Inspector, suggesting that inspectors in charge of controlling the retail industry services in Croatia were not doing their job quite well. And very soon they were joined by official instances such as European Centre for Consumer Excellence. And once they announced the first boycott, first Friday, now almost 2 weeks ago, they were gaining support by consumer protection associations, trade unions, political parties, but even the current sitting Minister of Economy, Ante Šušnjar, supported the initiative that basically started on social media.
And what long-term impacts could price caps have on Croatia's economy?
Well, this is a big question. Price caps mean basically that the government interferes in the market. And price caps are there to protect about 50 basic products, food products, hygiene products. And obviously, it is a very good short-term moment to stop wild growth of produce that people need every day. But on a long term, it absolutely is not sufficient. On a long term, there are many more mechanisms that have to be put in working by governments. So it is very interesting that in a discussion, the big criticism obviously goes to the big shopping chains, retailer shops. But, shops are not charity institutions. They have their own margins. And yes, of course, they will be earning money. But the good question is, what is the system where it starts? Obviously, it starts with producers. And Croatia has put itself in a very difficult position because since its independence in 1990s, it did not invest structurally in this basic industry, including agriculture. And this is what the government absolutely has a big say in how to continue from now, because price caps are going to do an immediate effect, but it's by no means a long-term perspective. And obviously from European Union perspective, as Croatia is part of European Union, you cannot interfere so much in the market mechanisms because there will be lots of reactions from agencies that safeguard healthy competition and so forth, etc.
And could this trigger genuine change, or are they just PR tactics?
Well, I think obviously it is such an important wake-up call for Croatian government because the general defense mechanism is always to say, Croatia is no difference because we are now in a global inflation and almost a recession period, and this global inflation sort of touches us and has a bigger and more serious effect on small economies as Croatia. But it's not good enough. And I think the Croatian citizens who now, since 2013, are free to work in any country of EU, they come back with their experiences in the States where they work and live. And they basically understand, I'm doing the same job as I was doing in Croatia. But now, when I work in Germany or the Netherlands, I have my salary, and my God, I can pay my accommodation, I can pay food, I can provide for schooling for my children. And why is it so that with the same job description, same working hours, I cannot meet ends if I would have lived in Croatia? So Croatian government basically has a lot to do if Croatia is going to continue to be a well-functioning and economically healthy state, because economic health equals social equilibrium and social peace.
All right, Nevenka Trump-Vrkic from The Hague there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
The European Union will not renew its cap on the price of gas sold in the EU. The limit was put in place to avoid spikes in prices triggered by Russia's war in Ukraine. Brussels now says that prices have stabilised and the cap is no longer needed. Alex Kadir reports from Brussels.
In September 2022, Europe faced a major energy crisis. It needed to find new sources of gas to keep prices from ballooning out of control.
We are facing an extraordinary situation, not only because Russia is an unreliable supplier, as we have witnessed over the last days, weeks, months, but also because Russia is actively manipulating the gas market.
In the meantime, the European Commission had to act fast to stop this becoming a lot more expensive.
We have now to limit this inflationary impact of gas on electricity and everywhere in Europe. This is why we are ready to discuss a cap on the price of gas that is used to generate electricity.
But that was easier said than done. Diplomats involved in the negotiations to get member states on board said they were mired with impossible demands. But after months of negotiating, white smoke. A deal to cap gas prices in Europe was agreed for the very first time. Russia's war in Ukraine caused gas prices in the EU to soar to more than $350 per megawatt hour. With these new rules, the price would be capped at nearly half that.
The decision to introduce the price cap was historic, a message from EU leaders here in Brussels that energy blackmail from Moscow would not work. But despite months of wrangling and haggling about how low to set the cap or exactly when it might kick in, it never did. In the 2 years since the price cap was agreed, prices never got high enough to trigger it.
We asked the European Commission if that means the cap was a bit of a waste of time.
It was absolutely not a waste of time. The situation in the market is calmer. Our member states are much more robust. We have diversified our sources. We are no longer dependent on a single supplier.
Gas prices in Europe have fluctuated dramatically since the start of Russia's war in Ukraine. But Europe isn't nearly as dependent as it was 3 years ago. Before the war, the EU got more than 40% of its gas from Russian sources. Today, that number is closer to 10%. And while prices have fluctuated, they haven't spiked anywhere near the level hit in the immediate aftermath of the energy crisis. But consumer rights groups say that although the cap itself was never triggered, it did have a positive impact.
Used or not, the end of the price cap could indicate the end of Europe's energy crisis, a quietly historic moment at the end of very volatile times across the European Union. Alex Cadier, TRT World, Brussels.
In the wake of the recent Stilfontein tragedy, which left nearly 80 illegal miners dead, attention has intensified on the systemic challenges within South Africa's mining sector. The upcoming Mining Affected Communities Summit seeks to address these issues by uniting affected communities in a collective call for reform and highlights the urgent need for a more equitable and inclusive approach to mining practices in the country. Illegal mining cost South Africa over $3 billion last year. Unregulated mineral extraction drains the economy and fuels crime. Efforts to curb it remain largely ineffective. At least 78 miners died in a police siege in December. The tragedy exposes the dangers of illegal mining. Affected communities bear the brunt of the aftermath. The summit aims to form a strong movement of resistance against systemic issues in the mining sector. A protest is planned for February 5th to deliver collective demands to the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. For more, we're joined by Crystal Alderson in Cape Town. Crystal, tell us more about the primary objectives of this upcoming mining summit.
Yes, so good day. I'm at the Mining Indaba where 15,000 delegates, we're talking CEOs, we're talking government ministers, not only from South Africa, but across Africa and other mining countries in the world are going to discuss. And the theme is future-proofing Africa's mining. Now, of course, as you mentioned, one of the big issues that South Africa is facing is illegal mining. But it's not only South Africa. In Ghana, you have the same issue. Also in the DRC, and Africa has 30% of the world's mineral deposits. So we're talking diamonds, gold, platinum, manganese, and of course, more importantly, all those products needed to manufacture EV batteries. So the theme, future-proofing African mining, includes how do governments deal with illegal mining. And for instance, last week, a report by a very reputable research organization in the mining sector found, for instance, that in South Africa, some of the illegal mining, and as we call it, Zama's years, it actually ends up being bought by some major mining companies, which names they didn't mention. So this is the intricate nature of illegal mining alone that not only South Africa is facing, but also the continent. And these are but some of the issues under discussion this week at the Mining Indaba taking place in Cape Town.
And in light of the recent Stilfontein tragedy, what immediate actions are being proposed to prevent such incidents in the future?
I think in South Africa's case, they are saying that mine owners need to take responsibility because in the legislation, it clearly states that if you abandon your mine or if you're no longer doing mining, mining owners have the responsibility to close the mine or rehabilitate, and this has not happened. And now the responsibility falls on government to do it, which of course the government doesn't have the resources to do it. So whilst the legislation is in place, mining owners have simply just stayed away. And so there is a call to actually tighten the responsibilities of those mining owners. And that is one legislative issue. But I think on the ground, given so many abandoned mines that we have in South Africa, I don't think it's going to be vanishing overnight. And we're going to continue to see illegal mining. And I think Stilfontein just brought to light the extent of the challenge that we have in the country around illegal mining.
All right, Crystal Odison, we will have to leave it there. Thank you very much for that update. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio has delivered a warning from Donald Trump to Panama's president over the country's shipping canal. He says America will act unless Panama stops what Trump says is Chinese control. The company that helps run the shipping route is a Hong Kong firm that manages ports across the world, and Panama rejects allegations that it has violated the Canal Treaty. Our North America correspondent John Brain is in Panama City.
All smiles outside the presidential palace, but Marco Rubio had come to Panama to deliver a rebuke and a warning. He told the country's leaders that unless Chinese influence over their canal is curbed immediately, the US will take action. According to Donald Trump, that action could involve the US military taking control of the canal by force, a threat rejected by Panama's president.
The sovereignty of Panama is not in doubt. That is very important. There is no doubt that the canal is operated by our country, and it will continue to be so.
Chinese culture is deeply embedded in Panama. On Sunday, the Chinese New Year was being celebrated here. But it's the ownership of two vital ports by the Chinese-linked company Hutchison which concerns the Americans. However, Panama denies that that gives China any undue influence.
Do you see that the ship is a Chinese ship that's going through the canal because...
Miguel Guerra was the first worker to be hired at the Panamanian Canal after the American handover of 1999. He's still here now.
Is it a Chinese-operated canal?
That's not true. There is no Chinese here. The Chinese that are working here in the canal is Panamanian Chinese. It's not Chinese from Asia.
So you're not seeing any Chinese influence?
There is no Chinese here working for Panama Canal.
Many Panamanians are bewildered and angered by Trump's threat.
He doesn't know how to communicate as a president. He should be wiser, because that is not the way.
It's worrisome for Panama as a sovereign country to receive this threat. We as Panamanians are a bit scared.
But could Donald Trump really send the troops here? Well, it's not quite as far-fetched as it might sound. Although the US has no right whatsoever to retake the Panama Canal, the treaty did stipulate that it has to remain neutral. So if Washington determines that a foreign power is now in control, it could, in theory, order a military intervention.
Some believe that the root of Trump's concern is not so much the operation of the canal itself, but the growing influence of China in the region as a whole.
The US has lost its connections and power in Latin America. China is now the global powerhouse in the region. So with his America First agenda, Trump wants to get America's power back. But it won't happen with any military solution.
But even the threat of military action may already be working. Panama has announced it's cancelling its participation in China's Belt and Road project. John Brain, TRT World, Panama City.
Well, that's all your business news for now. Thanks for watching.